This is what Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Hua Chunying described as a happy Chinese people. Whether it's on the streets, under bridges, in underground passages, or even in public restrooms, they are filled with homeless vagrants. Have you ever seen this real China?
Despite the Chinese government's efforts to manipulate economic data and hide the real financial situation, the reality of widespread unemployment, companies on the brink of bankruptcy, and the collapse of property firms is becoming increasingly apparent to the world. Looking at social media in China, posts about layoffs, unemployment, and the difficulty of finding a job are everywhere. These unemployed individuals are burdened with mortgage and car loan payments, as well as the costs of raising children and caring for elderly parents, and they don't know what to do. Many, under financial pressure, have become Didi, China's version of Uber drivers, delivery drivers, or become content creators, working themselves to exhaustion without being able to take a break. One of these individuals is a young man delivering food. Despite repeatedly collapsing from exhaustion, he continues to work because the pressures of life won't allow him to stop. A self-media blogger in Zhengzhou, Henan, posted a video discussing unemployment on his channel, which resonated with many viewers. He shared that his company had already laid off employees. Recently, he had a meal with a laid-off colleague who broke down in tears while talking about his struggles, which deeply saddened the blogger. His colleague, who is slightly older and comes from a rural background, has a child and a monthly mortgage of over 4,000 yuan, plus a car loan of 1,600 yuan. He never imagined he would be laid off, so he didn't budget his spending. When he was called to the office on the day of the layoffs, he was terrified. He had gone home and told his wife what happened, wanting to cry, but unable to. During their meal, his colleague drank heavily and started crying. He said that the 25th of each month was his mortgage payment due date, and he had just paid his car loan a few days earlier. Without a new job, he doesn't know how he would manage the next month. He had already sent out about 20 resumes, but had not received any responses. Seeing his colleague, the blogger thought of himself. He said, "If it were me who got laid off, I'd feel the same way. In middle age, with parents and children to care for, mortgages and car loans to pay, and all these financial pressures, we finally understand what it means to be stuck in a difficult situation." A self-media personality in Henan said that her husband also lost his job, finalizing his resignation in early July. Her husband, born in the 1980s, had been living in Kunming for 11 years. He worked for his former company for nearly 11 years and for his new company for 3 months before being caught up in the wave of unemployment. She said, "Now with no source of income, we are at a loss. Middle-age unemployment is terrifying. We have parents and children to care for, rent and living expenses to cover. The job market has been bad for the past 2 years, with companies large and small laying off employees. I heard that many companies in Kunming closed down in the first half of this year." Due to her husband's unemployment, she and her 2 children might soon have to leave Kunming and return to Chuqing. In the past 2 years, recent college graduates have also been heavily affected by unemployment. Shandong blogger Happy Leaf is a recent college graduate. In a recent video, she said she received her diploma in mid-July over a month ago. She discovered that college graduates are everywhere, and despite sending out resumes daily, she received very few responses. She now spends her days in self-doubt, depression, anxiety, and despair. Out of the 7 people in her dorm room, 5 are currently unemployed. She said, "I'm breaking down. For college students without family connections, graduation indeed means unemployment. After graduating, I feel completely powerless." On July 15th, the much-delayed third plenary session of the 20th Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, finally took place. Traditionally, each plenary session focuses primarily on economic and reform policies. On the same day, the CCP's National Bureau of Statistics released economic data for the first half of the year. However, unlike usual practice, this time the data was only published online without holding a press conference. The spokesperson also responded selectively to questions online. The CCP chose to release this data on the day of the plenary session to project an image of economic stability and promote the session. Chinese affairs expert Wang He commented, "The CCP did this because the data looks relatively favorable. They believe it can give them some faith and confidence. This is purely a political maneuver. Everyone knows that China's economic environment is shaky. Foreign investment is withdrawing, domestic demand is weak, and people can't find jobs. There are too many problems. In this situation, the CCP is trying to sing the praises of a bright economic outlook by manipulating the data." According to Wang He, the data released during the plenary session is selectively published by the CCP, and much of it is fabricated. It mainly highlights growth rates while omitting or cutting data that shows no growth or decline, which is typical for the CCP government. The National Bureau of Statistics of China press release emphasizes overall stability with progress by focusing only on growth figures. However, despite the CCP's careful manipulation, many economic indicators still show a trend of growth followed by decline due to the ongoing economic slump in China. For instance, the GDP growth rate for the first half of the year was between 5% and 5.3%. However, quarterly, the GDP grew by 5.3% in Q1 and by 4.7% in Q2, which is below the expected 5% to 5.3% range. It is also the lowest growth rate since the first quarter of last year. Additionally, the value-added output of industrial enterprises above a designated size grew by 6% in the first half of the year, but only by 5.3% in June. Similarly, consumption and investment growth followed the same pattern. In the first half of this year, China's total retail sales of consumer goods were approximately 23.6 trillion yuan, a year-on-year increase of 3.7%, but the growth rate in June was only 2%, with a month-on-month decline of 0.12%. Based in the U.S., economist David Huang stated that the National Bureau of Statistics statements resemble political propaganda more than an accurate reflection of the economy. He explained, "When we look closely at the detailed data, the situation doesn't look good. Overall, there might be a slight increase in one month, but then growth slows down the next month, indicating that the economy is still unstable and in a downward trend. For example, when there are many orders, industrial output might increase suddenly, making it seem better for that month. But if the products aren't sold, the next batch of orders decreases, so the economy can't be considered to be growing. Instead, it's still hitting bottom. The actual economic situation is that there is significant downward pressure, and we don't see any signs of improvement. It will likely take some time to hit bottom, so the situation is not as optimistic as the CCP claims." The continuous decline in the Chinese real estate market further illustrates this point. According to the latest data from the National Bureau of Statistics, real estate development investment in China fell by 10.1% in the first half of this year. Meanwhile, the sales area of newly built homes nationwide decreased by 19% year-on-year, and sales of newly built commercial housing dropped by 25%. In June, the sales prices of newly built homes in first-tier cities fell by 3.7% year-on-year, while second- and third-tier cities saw declines of 4.5% and 5.4% respectively. The drop was even more significant in the second-hand housing market, with prices in first-tier cities down 9% year-on-year, including a 12.4% decline in Guangzhou. Prices in second- and third-tier cities fell by 7.9% and 7.7% respectively. David Huang also noted that the sales area and sales volume of new home developments are both declining. An important detail is that the decline in sales volume is faster than the decline in sales area, indicating a significant price drop, suggesting a lack of market support. Currently, only a few core cities like the Pearl River Delta, Beijing, and Shanghai can maintain stability. Other cities across the country are likely to face severe challenges over the next 5 to 10 years, with no sign of a real estate market revival in the next 5 years. Back in May, the CCP introduced a series of measures of historical significance to stimulate the real estate market. These included lowering down payment ratios, reducing housing provident fund loan interest rates, removing the lower limit on mortgage rates, and purchasing unsold residential properties for affordable housing. Despite these measures, the real estate market remained sluggish. It can be said that China's real estate market is suffering from severe overcapacity, with housing inventory accumulated for over 10 years. It is said that the current housing stock could accommodate 1.4 billion people, matching China's total population, which means every person would need to own a house to clear the inventory. However, given China's high housing prices, this is impossible. Chinese dissident and democracy activist Wang Juntao stated, China's GDP figures have never been trustworthy. Local and central governments fabricate these numbers to show good performance. This is why Li Keqiang always emphasized that to understand China's real economic situation, one should look at the Keqiang Index. Wang Juntao added that the current Chinese economic data is undoubtedly in disarray because people generally feel the economic downturn. Even previously prosperous areas like Beijing and Shanghai are now experiencing a downturn, and this widespread perception cannot be faked. Regarding youth unemployment rates, data from the National Bureau of Statistics shows that before the pandemic, the average youth unemployment rate in China was around 10%. Last year, it exceeded 20%. In 2020, the youth unemployment rate peaked at 16.8% due to the impact of the pandemic, and the annual average for 2022 was as high as 17.5%, which was 3.2 times the overall social unemployment rate, with a monthly peak reaching 19.9%, a record high. In April 2023, the youth unemployment rate exceeded 20% for the first time, rising to 20.8% in May and further to 21.3% in June, an increase of 0.5 percentage points month on month, setting a new record for 3 consecutive months and exceeding the overall social unemployment rate by more than 4 times. The situation became so dire that in June last year, after the unemployment rate for the 16 to 24 age group soared to a historic high of 21.3%, authorities announced they would stop publishing this data. However, in January this year, the National Bureau of Statistics still released the youth unemployment rate for December of last year, but the adjusted figures excluded students aged 25 to 29, marking the first time the CCP excluded in-school students from the statistics. On April 16 this year, Sheng Lai-yun, Deputy Commissioner of the National Bureau of Statistics, mentioned at a press conference that the youth unemployment rate slightly increased in the first quarter and needed close attention, but no specific data was disclosed. Given the CCP's usual practice of concealing unfavorable information, the real numbers are likely even worse. The CCP also released the urban surveyed unemployment rate for the first 2 quarters of this year, averaging 5.1%, down 0.1 percentage points from the first quarter. The National Bureau of Statistics primarily focused on the urban surveyed unemployment rate. The urban labor supply mainly consists of college graduates and 300 million migrant workers. However, migrant workers' employment situation is not included in the urban surveyed unemployment rate, even though they are currently the largest unemployed group. Therefore, the urban surveyed unemployment rate, which excludes migrant workers' data, lacks credibility. Furthermore, looking at job opportunities provided by various economic sectors in China, the private sector accounts for 83% of employment opportunities. But as China's economic situation deteriorates and major cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou decline, foreign businesses are leaving and various industries are stagnating. Private enterprises are also facing a wave of closures, with 459,000 catering businesses being deregistered or revoked in the first quarter of 2024 alone. This year, the number of college graduates in China also hit a record high of 11.79 million. Former Premier Li Keqiang once said that each 1% increase in GDP creates 1 million jobs, meaning GDP growth must reach 11.79% for all graduates to find employment. However, based on the latest data showing a GDP growth of only 5% in the first half of this year, nearly 7 million college graduates will be unable to find jobs. This discrepancy highlights the inconsistency with the CCP's reported employment and unemployment data. Wang Juntao analyzed, the CCP views youth unemployment as a political issue, elevating it to a matter of national security. Given the CCP's habit of falsifying data, there's a high likelihood of manipulation. The CCP usually employs 3 methods to falsify unemployment data. The government alters the figures, doesn't record certain data, or local governments underreport adverse employment statistics. Another factor is that people have generally given up reporting their status. Some Chinese netizens have noted that the true extent of unemployment is well known. Currently, 1 in 3 young people is unemployed. With job hunting being extremely difficult, most people survive by setting up stalls, delivering food, or driving for DD. These realities directly reflect the highest unemployment rate since the 1990s. Looking ahead at China's economic future, the feedback from the market is overwhelmingly negative, with no positive signs in sight. The next task for CCP leader Xi Jinping is to maintain stability using political means to address economic problems. The economic issues have reached an unsolvable point, necessitating desperate stability maintenance and market economy restrictions, gradually reverting to planned economic measures. This period of major economic decline has been humorously dubbed garbage time by the Chinese public. Garbage time originally refers to the final moments of a sports game when the score difference is too great for any comeback, rendering the remaining time meaningless and boring. In February this year, Dr. Liu Junning, a former researcher at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences Institute of Political Science, used this term to describe the countdown to the CCP's regime change. During this period, no political maneuvers by the CCP appear capable of reversing the situation. The party's inherent nature and the perceived inevitability of its downfall have reached a critical point, marked by widespread public discontent. The populace is left to endure these challenging times, commonly referred to as lying flat.